Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Bible in Order, where we are chronologically going through the entire Bible in 1 year. Today's reading for September 11th is Ezekiel chapters 44 and 45. Some days I feel completely and totally inept to teach through the Bible, especially when it comes to passages like this. The truth is, chapter 44 begins talking about this prince who will be dwelling in the temple or overseeing the worship that is taking place in the city of Jerusalem. And again, the question comes up, who is this prince? Who is this ruler, this leader? Who is the one who is overseeing the worship in the temple? We have a couple likely candidates. One, maybe the first person you would think of is the Messiah. It's Jesus himself. But it cannot be because he offers sacrifices on behalf of himself. Some people believe it's a Davidic king, like it's carrying on. It's a person, it's a man who is carrying on. He's the fulfillment of the prophecy given to David, the promise that he would always have a son forever on his throne. Some people believe it's actually David himself resurrected. I believe it probably is David or his likeness. How do we interpret all of this? Is it literal? Is it a literal depiction of a temple that is taking place on this earth at some point in the future? It can't be anything in the past, at least not that we're aware of, because there's never been a temple like this. So what is it? And I believe, this is just my opinion, I believe it's a representation of a spiritual truth that exists outside of time. God has no beginning, he has no end. God is completely and totally above and outside of the chain of events that are time, present, past, future, like points on a line. Points going forward are the future, points going backward are the past. But God created time. And so if you think of the long number of cars clasped together, you ever sat at a railroad crossing with a long train, miles long, going by, you know this analogy, and we are watching it go by. But God is in the train, he's above the train, he's below the train, he's before the train, he's after the train. We only get to see this glimpse that's in front of us right now, but God's already in the future and he's still in the past. If you go even further and you believe the little known, in my experience, idea that the days of creation, the first 7 days described in Genesis, represent 1,000-year periods of human history, and that God has told us in code from the very beginning, from cover to cover of the Bible, literally from Genesis 1 to the very end of Revelation, that there are 7 days in a week, that each day of the literal creation represents a 1,000-year period in the unfolding of human history, with the final day, the Sabbath day rest, the day in which God rested in Genesis, equates to the 1,000-year reign where Jesus will be reigning on earth. And there are many, many scriptures throughout. If you have eyes to see it, you might just see it. So if you take that view, and that sacrifices would be offered for 7 days, it reflects all of human history. And so outside of the space-time restriction that we are so focused on because it's what we live in the midst of, outside of that, there are sacrifices being made. If you remove time and it's no longer a restriction, the sacrifices being made in the temple, although imperfect and a foreshadowing of Jesus' ultimate sacrifice, outside of time, that is still happening. If God exists outside of time, there is no past for him, there is no future, and the past. Everything is the present for him. If God is that big, and I understand this is deep and different from our daily talks normally, but I just don't know how else to approach these chapters. If God exists outside of time, then Jesus' sacrifice on the cross from 2,000 years ago is still right in front of him. Chapter 44, the man, Ezekiel's tour guide in this vision, brought me back toward the sanctuary's outer gate that faced east, and it was closed. Yahweh said to me, "This gate will remain closed, and it will not be opened, and no one will enter through it, because Yahweh, the God of Israel, has entered through it. What is holy and set apart unto God, no man can touch. Therefore it will remain closed. The prince himself will sit in the gate and eat a meal before Yahweh." Who is that prince? Is it David? Down in verse 6, God says, "I have had enough of all your detestable practices." So is this in the future? Is this after Jesus died on the cross to pay for the sins? Isn't this in the future when Jesus is reigning during the millennial reign? Isn't this the Sabbath day of rest, that last 1,000-year period of human history before God makes a new heaven and a new earth and we dwell with him for all of eternity? It seems that way. What detestable practices? When you brought in foreigners uncircumcised in both heart and flesh. Now, of course, circumcision refers to a physical cutting away of the male anatomy as a way to keep them clean, but it's representative. It's not about the physical act. It's a representation of cutting away of the flesh of the heart. That's why so often when you see the word uncircumcised in the Bible, it says uncircumcised of heart. God is trying to help us understand there's no coming into the fold of his family without a cutting away of the flesh. We must deny the flesh. The cross is where the flesh of Christ died. And Jesus said we must pick up our crosses daily and follow him if we want to follow him. We get the joy of being transformed into his image by denying ourselves, cutting off the flesh. We cannot be part of him if we maintain and hold on to our physical, fleshly desires. Then we talk about the priest's duties. In verse 19, before they go out of the inner court, after they've been ministering in the temple, they must take off the clothes they have been ministering in, leave them in the holy chambers, and dress in other clothes so that they do not transmit holiness to the people through their clothes. They cannot take the quality of God, the benefit of being in God's presence, out to the people who did not take the steps to purify themselves. The people who are not willing to go through the cross of denying themselves, of cutting off the flesh, of circumcising their own hearts. People who are not willing to forsake all and follow him can have no part of him. But here's what the priests are to do. They are to teach my people the difference between the holy and the common, to explain to them the difference between the clean and the unclean. That is our job, friends, because we are a royal priesthood, 1 Peter tells us. We are the living stones of the new temple. We are given the charge of communicating to the world what he is like. And we cannot do that effectively until we get fully into the kingdom, until we deny ourselves and let his spirit flow through us, let his word illumine our hearts and our minds. There is no cheap gospel that changes people. God says in verse 28, "This will be their inheritance. I am their inheritance." My friends, if you are in the kingdom for any other gain other than God himself, you are in it for the wrong motives. It's all about Him. It's about wanting Him. It's about knowing Him. It's about being used and transformed by Him. It's about partnering with Him to change this world, to advance His kingdom. It's not about me or you or our agendas. It's about Him. Chapter 45 talks about the portion of the land that's set apart for Him, for His people, to do what He wills. It's understanding that He is the one in control. It's His rules. It's His way. Everything must be done the way He wants it. It shows us that every single person takes part. Everybody who wants to be part of the kingdom has a place in the kingdom. We all have a role. It costs us each something. We have to lay down our own lives for the greater good, for the advancement of the kingdom. We don't get to have it our way. This isn't Burger King. This is not a buffet. This is about submission and transformation that comes from cutting away the flesh, denying the flesh, picking up the cross, which was made to die on in order to further His agenda. The important thing is we all have a role. He wants to partner with us. This God of all creation, who is holy and divine and set apart, who is so unimaginably higher and bigger than anything we can even imagine, that He wants to partner with us and that His ways are so much better than our ways. His longing to bless us is so much greater than our own longing for the blessing. When we come to the understanding that what God wants for us is so much greater than anything we could ever hope to attain on our own, then we start to get it. Then we start to trust Him enough to lay down our own desires, to forsake the things that are idols that are keeping us from full and true submission. When we understand that what He wants to do in us and through us is so much greater than what we could ever accomplish on our own, because He loves us more than we love ourselves. It's hard to believe, but it's true. He loves you more than you love yourself. He loves you more than your mom loves you, or your spouse or your child loves you. He loves you more than you love your child. That's for sure. And He knows better. May God bless you, my friends. Thank you for being on this journey with me. We'll see you tomorrow.